Good evening, everyone, and welcome. This time I'll call the second Paulding County Commissioners' public hearing of July 23rd, now at 6 p.m. On the millage rate. I'll call that meeting to order, and very grateful that Chuck Hart can lead us in an invocation here and lead us in the pledge. Stand straight.
All right, let's pray. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we do thank you for tonight. We thank you for those folks that have showed up tonight, Lord Jesus, and just help us as we go back through this, Lord. Just help us to review this over and over again. Lord, we just want to find the right answers. We want to do the right things. We want you to give us the wisdom to do the right things. And just help us to stand by our decisions. And Lord Jesus, just help us to go forward and just commit ourselves to your will. In your name we ask, amen.
Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks so much, Commissioner Hart, for getting us started off in the right direction. We have no minutes for this meeting. The business of the meeting, as I've already said, is to discuss the millage rate, the second of three required meetings on the millage rate. So we've already got Ms. Pollard, the Finance Director, at the podium, and she's going to kick off an introduction and review and just kind of give us a foundation from which to work. And hopefully we'll have somebody speak.
Okay, I'm not sure if anybody in the audience wasn't here this morning. I think we were all here, but I guess because it's live stream, we probably need to go through somewhat the same presentation.
I see Jim, so he's
Were you here this morning? Oh, you weren't? Okay. Well, this is all for you. Okay, so we have assessed values. We're here today to set the millage rate, and that will give us the tax levy, which feeds the 2020 budget. To do that, we have assessed values. Citizens should have gotten an appraisal or their tax assessment almost 2 months ago. And of that value, then you have a 45-day appeal if you didn't agree with that assessed value. The state law says that if that assessment resulted in an increase for the countywide gross digest, which increased 7.98%, and everybody's could have been different. This is gross that we're working with. We have to adjust the millage rate down to offset as if those reassessments did not occur. So calculation goes assessed value, and the 40% gives us our gross digest. Again, that's countywide. And then if you consider all the exemptions and take those away, you get a net tax digest. And that amount is multiplied by the millage rate to give us the tax levy. So your assessed value times the millage rate equals tax levy. We recently ran a 5-year history ad. We ran this ad twice in the paper. It gives you some, this year, along with the last 5 years of history. We've seen some growth. From 2014, we were seeing a little bit of growth, and then we continued to grow up until this 2019 year. We had additional growth, which is the reason why we're here today. The rollback rate, we've talked already about that a little bit, is Taxpayer Bill of Rights requires that we take our assessed value and roll back the millage rate as if that assessment had not occurred in order to get the tax levy. If we don't roll back the millage rate, then we're required to hold 3 public hearings, and this is the second of those 3 public hearings. We did that. We've ran our ad. We've advertised a 6.5. If we had advertised a 6.0 and we determined that our budget was going to take a 6.2, we would have to start the process over. We couldn't adopt a 6.2. So we have advertised a 6.5, and we're continuing to work with the budget. Value of a meal, 2010, the value of a meal was 3.5 million, almost 3.6, and our millage rate was 7.6 meals. 2019, the value of a meal is 5 million, and this calculation is on 6.5, and 2018 it was 6.079, which will result in $32 million in property taxes in net levy, 32.6 million, if we remain with 6.5. Levy versus digest, this is just a picture of the same information. So basically, the red line is the value of the meal and how that's changed over time. And the blue line is the value of the levy. So that's the value of the meal times the millage, value of the meal times the millage rate to get to the levy. What do our surrounding counties' millage rates look like? These are 2018 because everybody's doing the same thing right now as that we are. They're trying to set their millage rates. And so Paulding's 30 line, so 30.128 as of last year. What is our surrounding digest comparison? So how does topic of interest for everyone, I think, recently has been residential versus commercial and industrial. This gives you an idea of how Paulding compares to others with our residential versus commercial and industrial. So all of the residences require services. So even if they might not use those services on a daily basis, but they have to be available to them. We're here to serve the people that live in those residences. We want commercial because they don't use as many services. So what does that do to your tax bill? If you have a property that was valued at $150,000 last year, that value, according to the Growth Digest, increased to about $161 in the 2019 year. That would equate to a 40% assessed value of $64,000, and your millage rate would increase for the M&O $54. If you go from a 6.079 at a $150,000 house to an increase in value and increase to 6.5 millage rate, almost $55. Where do my tax dollars go? So the school gets 62% of that tax dollars. So that tax bill works out to be 62% to the school, 21% to maintenance operations, which funds our general fund. Bond is 7% and fire is 10%. How are funds spent? Public safety is 35%. Public safety consists of your coroner, your sheriff, your detention, your marshal, your animal control. And public works consists of DOT, stormwater, recycling. And general government is the required resources to operate all of those. So you have the commission is included in general government, finance, HR, information technology, public information, just to name a few. And so we can open it up for comments unless you have any questions.
No questions. I'll ask if there's citizens wishing to speak. Hearing none.
I do. I'll be right there, please. Sorry.
Sue Wilkins. I hear the film studio finally sold. Correct? Excellent news. And I also hear that it sold for $4 million. Great. Will the IBA be applying the money to their outstanding film studio bonds.
You come to the IBA meetings.
Oh, come on, you're there too. You know they don't discuss anything important in public.
Well, it's a long conversation. It's a long discussion. So,
Yes or no would do.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I was aware of the closing, but I wasn't aware of the price. That is something I believe that is being considered. As counsel to this board, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know that it would be appropriate for this board to provide an answer to that question as part of the budget hearing. I understand the question is certainly out there, but in terms of this board answering that question, I think that's really outside the purview of this board.
With all due respect, Jason, I feel like that's a way of avoiding the answer. This is a perfect place because we're discussing the budget, and from what I gathered from information that Tabitha gave us this morning, we're still paying that bond payment, at least for 2020. So I would think at this point, since the film studio closed a couple weeks ago at least, that you would have an indication by now to whether that money is being applied to the bonds or not. Let's not play games. I've been told by multiple people, including you, Mr. Carmichael, at Mr. Hart's town hall, that they will not be giving that money back to us. Mr. Carmichael, I believe you said according to the bond contract, that money can be reinvested in other places instead of being paid on the bonds.
Ms. Wilkins, if I may just answer it, and I appreciate your question. Mr. Chairman, if you have the answer to that question, if you know what the answer to that question is, feel free to answer it. But you may or may not know the answer.
the IBA, you have to get into the mission of the IBA and what their charter is for Paulding County. And then you have to get into a manual that thick of legal documents that describe the bonds and what the IBA can do and what they can't do with paying those bonds. So that's why, I would rather us have a private conversation, maybe get another IBA member and lay it out so that there's nothing confusing or there's no misunderstanding by anyone that's going to watch this on camera. So I would just rather be able to explain it in a more laid out fashion than just trying to give you a quick yes or no answer.
Okay. Well, I'm really not interested in a private discussion about this. If you ever want to talk about it at a meeting, IBA meeting, that'd be great. But this is a public issue, so I don't feel it deserves a private discussion. But, according to the IBA amendment of the Georgia Constitution, you're legally obligated to apply monies brought in through lease or sale of properties to the outstanding bonds, to their outstanding bonds. I don't know if this board is aware of that or not, but if you're not, I wish you would find out about that because you represent us. And the reason that's in there is to reduce the tax burden on the taxpayers. And I realize that the IBA, has visions of all kinds of great economic development. But I have to pay my bills before I go buy a new car or put in a new kitchen, as much as I would like to have those things. So I think it's safe to say that the citizens expect, first and foremost, the IBA pays their bills and puts that money back to the bonds, which is where it's legally supposed to go.
you'd have to show me that out of the bond documents because it's not there.
Do you think the bond document trumps the Georgia Constitution? I can easily show you, and I brought it up at an IBA meeting about a year ago as well.
Well, that's where you
But
should
that's a
bring it up.
stipulation.
Because, you've
Well,
got a
no,
six-member
because
board.
we're talking about budget, that you're going to raise our taxes most likely because, and that's part of the reason, because we're still paying money for them that they feel they don't have to just because. And it's
No,
not fair.
That's not a correct statement at all, and that's the reason I don't want to
Really?
get into the conversation. That to not pay just because, that
Well,
in no
because,
way is
okay,
accurate.
because they have plans and desires to do other things with it. That's not good enough.
When you invest money received from an IBA, an investment that was made in the film studio, and then you get returns on that, first of all, the film studio is going to be on the tax digest and bring in a large amount of tax revenue that can be used and defray and lower the taxes of the citizens. As we get more economic development, as the money is used to reinvest in properties that can bring other commercial activity, which will, again, get us away from that 11-12% that we are commercial today. And that means 80% comes out of the homeowner's wallet. So you're not understanding the tax balance and how the reinvestment will grow and provide more revenue so that the taxpayers end up getting a break in that fashion rather than just paying off the bond.
I totally get that, totally. But the end doesn't justify the means. We have been making payments on bonds that the IBA is supposed to be making. And finally, they have some revenue from a sale, and now they're going to say, sorry, taxpayers. I mean, just think, if that got applied to the bonds, and, which, by the way, has nothing to do now with the revenue we'll be getting from the film studio, but just think, that got paid down, and we received their tax dollars, I mean, we'd really be better off. So I can't justify them, the IBA doing what they want to do with the money because they simply want to. It's like, what are laws about? And that's, I mean, have we not been through enough because we're not playing by the rules? At any rate, I just needed to ask. Okay, thank you.
Jason, I know, trying to find the time, but later this week, if you could get verification about the legal requirement for payback of bonds after the sale of an asset like that, I would appreciate it. And if you could share that legal opinion with the board, that would be good to have verification of. Whether or not the law requires it, we need to get that money back. The bonds were issued for that, it's been sold, and if it was all paid off and they sold it and they had a vision to reinvest it for something else, we might be willing to have a different conversation, but you don't sell a car you stole the money on and then tell the bank, well, hold on, I'm not gonna use this money to pay off that loan, I'm gonna use it for reinvestment elsewhere, because the bank will have a thing or two to say about that. So, Dave, as you are on it, or by virtue of your position on this board, I'd ask as just fellow commissioner and representing the fifth of this board, that you lobby on this board's behalf for the return of that money to pay those bonds. Because the reality is that there is money in our budget to pay that, and it'll get paid. We know historically when bonds aren't paid, they're supposed to be paid. The county we'll pay it because we protect the credit rating, we make sure the bills get paid. But I would ask that you lobby on our behalf, on behalf of the taxpayers, that the money that comes from the sale of that studio go back to pay the debt that was incurred to build that studio.
Thank
It's
you.
not a matter of, it's a matter of what the legal documents that built the bonds and that the bonds were released on requires. Robert Reynolds, I can't tell you the date, but he said, or he stood at that microphone and went through a 10 or 15 minute presentation about a year ago that explained the highlights of what I'm referring to in the bond documents. That
All right, well, I'm
come
confident
together.
Jason will
No
give us.
problem. I'll be glad to look at the legal side of that.
That'd be great.
Thank you. Had some new people come in. We're involved in a public hearing, and if the reason you came was to,
We're for the next thing, we just thought we'd
Oh, you just-
relax.
okay. Well, if no other citizens have a desire to speak at the public hearing, then I'm going to close the public hearing, and then all I need is a motion to adjourn, and we'll prepare for the next regular session.
I'll make a motion, man. Chuck jumped for that microphone.
Motion.
I didn't see him move that quick one. I'll second your motion, Chuck.
And a second by Commissioner Davis. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries 5-0. We stand adjourned.